I'm just being very straightforward with you here. I don't see a pathway backward. I see only a pathway forward where we are adjusting to real-time change. And so that means our skills, our tools, and how we approach things are more important than ever. And so today is about learning from each other. Today is about hearing from 5 people in a panel discussion who give us a perspective, their perspective, on how they are trying to navigate this uncertain landscape. The thing we learned in the Office of Research in 2025, when every Friday was another, I won't say crazy, another announcement from the federal government on things that were happening. We have to be ready to adjust. We have to work together through those adjustments, and that's the way we make it through. And so learning from each other is a key part of that. So today I'm going to welcome up our 5 panelists who are going to talk with us about their experience through a series of questions. We're going to have some time, a little bit, I'll sneak some in there for Q&A. Later, we're also going to have a spotlight with one of our faculty giving us a little bit more insight from her perspective. And so let's get started. I'd like to invite our panelists to come up front. I'm going to have them introduce themselves, so I won't do that now, but I think we've got, yes, we've got all of our panelists. Just have a seat. And thank you, all of you, for being here today and for being part of this. And so I'm just going to get us started and probably, let's see now. So here is the microphone, and I'm going to turn it on. And so if you feel like your voice would work best with the mic, please feel free to use it. So I'm going to start on this end with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, to get us started today, could you briefly introduce yourself, your role, and describe the funding agencies or organizations you're typically working with?
Okay, great. Thanks for having me. Elizabeth Christensen, and I am a proposal development specialist in the College of Arts and Sciences. And my role is a little different if the other panelists are faculty. I don't have my own research program, but I'm really proud of the faculty that I've worked with over the years I've been here. And so right now, my priority are the biology faculty and then the chemistry and biochemistry faculty, although previously supported all the faculty in the previous College of Science. My role is really to help faculty at the very beginning stage. I can help with finding funding opportunities, but more often I'm mostly helping faculty who contact me when they have a proposal in mind and get them started with that.
I am Stephanie Borrie. I'm a professor and interim associate dean for research in the College of Education and Human Services. My research just very broadly looks at improving communication for people with communication disorders. My funding agencies, my funding journey has been very traditional. It's all based in NIH. Been funded continuously for the last 10 years. And it's followed a very traditional pathway. So I started with an early career research R21 and then did a few R21s, which are exploratory grants, built the pilot data for the more advanced R01, and currently have 2 active R01s for the different lines of my research program. So I'm hoping that there's some more variety on this, but I have had a very traditional NIH career.
Hi, I'm Dave Britt, and I've been here since 2002, and I'm in the biological engineering department, so it's pretty interdisciplinary. My first awards were at NSF, then National Institutes of Food and Agriculture, applying towards the land grant opportunities here at USU, American Heart Association, so I'm working on the biomedical side, as well as Dairy Management Inc., right? People say got milk, and so they have seed grants that aligned with some of the work that I could contribute to. Also some industry support, right? So always just casting a broad net for whatever funding's out there.
Hi, I'm Irina Polejaeva. I'm professor at ADS department, and focus of my research is development of large animal models for biomedical research as an animal model for human diseases. and also understanding reprogramming after semantic multi transfer of learning and opening. So my funding come from both traditional and non-traditional sources, probably a really, really broad range of different funding. So NIH is one of the primary for animal model characterization and epigenetic reprogramming. We also work with USDA in the reproduction field and getting funding from a variety of foundations. So American Heart Association, Cystic Fibrosis Foundation funded about half a dozen of projects in my lab. We recently started working with another foundation called Additional Ventures, which focuses on solving issues with single ventricle disease. And about half a dozen of private entities that funded our research.
Hi, I'm Jeff Horsburgh. I'm a professor in civil environmental engineering and at the Utah Water Research Laboratory. My research areas in hydroinformatics, hydro infrastructure development, water science, broadly water. And most of my early funding was from the National Science Foundation. But that's kind of broad now. I'm getting current funding from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And I had some private foundation funding as well and a few other sources, but a really important source of funding now for me and my program has been the state of Utah. And so those relationships have become like way more important now than some of the other sources that kind of dried up a little bit. So.
Thank you, all of you, for getting us started. And so, as each of us thinks about maybe approaching a new sponsor or a new pathway for our proposal submissions, can you each talk about kind of the pre-work you do strategically to position your proposal for submission? And this is just meant to be kind of a bullet point kind of thing where you can suggest a few things you do to help position your proposal strategically. You guys can pass the mic and respond as you like. I'm not going to say we need to go down the road.
I just see you guys can stop. Okay. All right.
Pre-work. I think looking at the calls that are coming out, looking at NIH just released a new strategic plan, things that they're interested in, keeping an eye on it, making sure that I know exactly what the conversations are happening with the agencies that I'm interested in applying to. Talking to people who've been funded by that agency, getting the insider scoop, huge, right? Huge to understand like how they got funded, what are the challenges they found. If it's a new agency to you, reaching out to the program officer and checking before you start writing a massive proposal that your project aligns with what they're looking for. If you're well versed in the program, then that might not be necessary. I think I'll hand it off now. That's good.
Yeah, I agree. Checking with the program manager is very important. I contacted my program manager at National Institutes of Food and Agriculture, which is in the nanotechnology for food and agricultural production. Unfortunately, he recently took a reduction in force incentive, like many of them did. So you still have to keep knocking. And I remember maybe 8 years ago, I came up with an idea. Tony said, well, Jason White at the Connecticut Experiment Station, RD, kind of has my portfolio covered with that. But, we still put something in. We were able to get it funded. So, they give you insight, but then I think it really comes down to the panel and what they like. So.
Yeah, I will add quite a few other points of that bullet list that Lisa asked. So, yeah, engagement with funding agency is a must, and everyone already acknowledged that. So, but I think there's a lot of other pieces going into successful application. So, aim development. So, your specific aim page is probably requires much more attention than any other document in your submission, because that's the document that everyone on the review panel will look and assess. And preliminary data generation, you need to make sure you have sufficient documentation of technical capability and that you can accomplish the goals. And analyze the gap of knowledge. So literature review and study and see what are you offering that has not been accomplished before. And another thing is critical, I believe, is strategic team alignment. So look for outside of your institution if you have a gap in basically skills in your in your team, in your lab. Find someone who can really complement your research, and often this proposal which larger teams have better success rates because you have expertise in the various areas. And I think one of the other things I like to look is analyze past winners. So go to see what proposal were funded and how you can align with that. So, and often we have, at least in our college, we can submit, especially if you're early career, submit your proposal for internal review. That's beneficial to get feedback from scientists or maybe just mentors. So you have a group of people. And I think I will let other people go.
Just briefly, I would add, there's ideas and there's opportunities. And your ideas may not be well aligned with the opportunity, and especially now because a lot of opportunities have gone away. And that may mean that you have to put some of those ideas on the shelf until when there's a good opportunity, and you may have to shift priorities or shift ideas to the opportunities that are there. So for me to be successful, I've had to be somewhat opportunistic, working on some of the things that maybe weren't my first choice, but I could get funding versus, trying to push my ideas in programs that are just never going to fund.
Pass the mic down. Well, you're passing the mic down. I want to point out a few things we know in the Office of Research. What's clear is that the review process at the federal agencies has changed. And it's changed in that there are the standard processes we all know, panel reviews, all these types of things. But the current administration has added additional layers of review. You need to understand that, for example, Irina, I'm going to use your example. When you're looking back at what was funded, that was under a different set of conditions most of the time. And the conditions now have a layer of the emphasis of the administration on them. And so when you're hearing quantum and AI and some other things, they're not joking around. And I've heard it from program officers. And so there are areas they are looking to prioritize. In some ways, you can help your program officer with your proposal by thinking about at least how to integrate with what may be a priority that they have to address. How do you know that? Look at the RFP and then call your program officer and say, I'm thinking of this, but I'm concerned about the AI, quantum, biotech, advanced manufacturing. Take your pick of the areas they're emphasizing. Let's talk about that in your area and what it means. So in other words, your questions should be more very attuned to our current timing, the current changes that are happening is the best advice we can give, because that's what I'm hearing. And Alexis may talk about that a little bit further when she's on stage. Now, I want to prompt Elizabeth here a little bit for your response. What do you know about reading an RFP right now? And maybe reading an RFP in the past? I mean, is this something that you've seen changes in, for example?
Well, I do see things that are completely not there anymore. A lot of DI, well, all DI is removed. So that was a priority before. It's something that can't be in there now. And we were so used to making sure that it was there. So that's probably the most glaring thing. But I think all these things are exactly what I would have said too, but I think I look at the proposal process a little bit more administratively. And because I get to see a lot of different proposals going through, I see the hiccups that happen and the challenges that happen. And so I'll try to alert faculty. For example, if you need a letter of support, I have seen that take much longer than people ever anticipated. So I will say, start now, decide who those people are, and get your template to them and ask them to, put that together for you. Something else too, I always look first at the eligibility criteria to make sure. Sometimes faculty get so excited about it looks like the perfect fit for their research, and they're ready to go, and they might not know it's a limited submission, and that they have to go through that process first to make sure that they're able to submit. And the other thing too that I will always say is start putting together your budget now. Start early, because you may have aims or project components that you think will be the perfect project, and then you realize, but there's not enough money to do all of those things, and it's a lot harder to trim the budget after you started writing your narrative. So that's kind of basic. And then I'll just want to add one other thing, and that is contacting the program officer, which we've already mentioned. But I've had faculty tell me that they reached out to a program officer and said, "Can I send you a one-page paper about my research?" Or they will talk to them and just tell them what it is. And the program officer might say, "You know, that is a great funding project, but right now our focus this cycle is on something else. Wait till the next cycle and then submit your proposal, because that's when our money is aligned with that type of funding option or project idea."
Wonderful. Before we go on, I'm going to add one other thing. When you're looking at an opportunity, what I hope you're hearing is your proposal development specialist can help you think through things really well, timeline and such. The other thing is your sponsored programs contact. Just sending an email to Sarah or Michaela or our other creative pros. I'm going to go after this, so I'm going to be submitting then. In a free moment, they may go look at the RFP and just make sure if there's anything that they're seeing that they want you to know about. And so make your plan and contact people so that they know what's coming. Okay, let's continue. Thinking about this timeline and planning. Some folks in here, I hope many of them, have current awards. And so you're in that kind of mindset where I have funds to operate, I'm doing my research, I'm publishing my papers. When do you begin planning for the next one? When do you start thinking about a funding opportunity to maintain momentum? Push it to the middle, make David start.
Okay, yeah, I'll start. Yeah, I do have a current award, and I'll be asking for a no-cost extension. I think that's something I've done on almost every award I've received. And even if it's not much that you want to carry over, I think that is important because it shows current funding, and that does help you springboard into the next proposal that you see coming out of that. And I think maybe Irina mentioned the word gaps, right? Or maybe when you're putting your proposal together. So identifying what you have brought the state of the research to, and then what gaps remain as you jump into the next proposal. But it is a catch-22 treadmill, right? That you have to already be on it to get something. And I've been fortunate getting started with some internal funding, and that even recently that comes up to help bridge between things. And I hope USU continues to have means to do that, right? So that you can have that momentum and keep it moving forward. But I also, look at like 59 and a half in 3 years. So maybe that's time just to take early retirement, be done.
Well, I seems like constantly thinking about new submissions. So we have about half a dozen of funding projects now. A couple of relatively big ones, so like R1, but it's on the third year, so we'll have one more year to go, and several USDA proposals by OPI. So we also have funding, as I said, from private entities, grants, because the amount of funding in different grants is different, and our research is expensive. So if it's a foundation grant, it's only a couple of $100,000. It really doesn't last long. And usually these proposals also are for shorter term, so usually 2 years instead of 4 or 5 that you can get with NIH or for USDA. So basically, we also what I'm trying to do in our lab and collaborators to establish our name as well recognized in our field. And it really helps when people reach out to us. Sometimes it's like reaching out and they have 2 weeks to submit their grant, and it's kind of let's squeeze these projects or basically they want to work with us and include us in that. And Cody just looking and smiling because we just had one proposal that they wanted to do animal studies in 3 years, and but then realized that it doesn't fit their budget. So they said, well, we want to do the same number of animals, but over 5 year period of time. So we have to really accommodate that last minute request. That basically it seems like I'm constantly kind of finding good opportunities, and but it's still submitting a good big application is time consuming. So if your primary PI for large application, then you need to start about 6 months in advance and probably about a year or two before your key funding source is ending. But if you are co-PI or sub-awardee, it takes much less time, of course, to be meaningful contribution and funding to the program, and basically juggling both options are important, I think, for this kind of funding conditions.
What I would add here is it depends a lot on the kind of research program that you want. The answer is yesterday, right? You should be thinking about this before you even get the funding, because if you want to establish a trajectory, then that trajectory has to be this project and the next project and the project after that. And it's, with the current sort of funding landscape, you're going to graduate a master's student in maybe a couple of years if you're lucky. PhD students take much longer. You're really lucky if you're going to get a 5-year grant that's going to support a PhD student start to finish. But if you don't, and you're trying to patch together funding for PhD students across multiple grants, like PhD students don't want to stop getting paid. So you got to think about that. And then if there's additional equipment and people and research staff that you want to build a large research program and go big, then you got to piece that together with multiple funding proposals, projects, and potentially even multiple agencies. And really, it depends on what you want and what's sustainable for you, because you're committing to those people. Like those students, you want them to graduate. You don't want them to go away. Additional people that you're paying, you want to maintain them. So you got to be careful about not only what you want, but what you commit to. And there's a certain amount that you have to commit to, because you're all thinking about promotion and tenure and all those sorts of pressures that you have on your career. But you also want to think about how do I want my life to go? Do I want to sign my whole life away to my research program, or do I want to have a good balance, to stay sane?
I think I agree with all of that. I think the only thing I would add is I think for me, I see grant writing as less sort of episodic, like this one and then this one, more continuous for me. So I have grants in and I'm writing other grants, and if a good opportunity comes up and we've got the capacity in the team to do it, I'll work on that grant, or I'll have a colleague lead it and be a co-I on it. So I'm just constantly, I just consider part of my job, right? Just part of my job is to write pubs, part of my job is also to write grants. And so I don't really see it as like, okay, I've got a grant, and so now I start my grant writing enterprise and I'll get going, a year or two out. It's more of a fluid thing. And I think that keeps you in the game as well. It keeps you writing grants, it keeps you used to it. It means that you don't feel overwhelmed when an opportunity comes up, because you're like, look, we're doing this all the time. So I think if you carve out a part of your time, which is just grant writing, even when you're fully funded, you can always use more money, right? So I think there's a way to do it where you just consider it part of your job.
And I'll just add, I think conventional wisdom is that when you get awarded, that's when you start looking for the next one. And keeping track of cycles, and then also developing a relationship with a program officer in the federal funding where you most find success is golden, because you can contact them, once in a while and find out, what is happening and kind of prepare for that.
So one thing to add here is, as you look at the federal landscape right now, I just want everybody to know we need to be thinking about the changing landscape in numerous ways. And I want to mention one other one, which is terms and conditions around awards. Now, I bring that up because that's something most of you don't ever think much about, because it's post-award stuff and we send you a packet and we hope you read it. But what's happening is the federal government is layering in executive order type language, layering in other things. Sometimes this is appearing all the way up front in RFPs. And I just want to re-emphasize the notion of when you're looking at a new program and you're looking at a new opportunity, to read it carefully and to bring it to the attention of those who can help you navigate any unusual aspects to it. It's really hard if you get to our office with a submission and we see that there's already a term and condition in the front that USU will never be able to accept, because we're a state entity. And sometimes a terms and conditions, particularly with some private sponsors, can be things that we under state law cannot accept. So again, when you find the opportunity, engage people like your proposal development specialist, or engage Jerry Hansen's team overall, or sponsored programs if you have any questions about language you see in there. And I mean, read it from front to back. It's important these days. You can't believe where stuff comes in these days, that we'll find it and not realize it was there. So, okay, next one. I think we've touched on this a little bit, but we're seeing a lot of shift in funding. I mean, federally, and so we're looking at how to maintain sustainable research programs. And so the question of sustainability comes up. And I just wanted to hear from each of you how you think about that sustainability model for yourself in your research.
I think as far as sustainability, I'm thinking about what's been changed. The federal funding landscape changing so much, and so that's how I'm thinking about this question. But I think Lisa did an incredible job with the federal funding updates that she had going, and Dominique's been sending out the Funding Frontiers newsletter, and I think those resources are so valuable to our researchers, and that they should make sure to check those websites that are updated and check the Funding Frontiers newsletter for things that are happening, and that I think will go a long way towards sustainability.
I have an amazing proposal development team here, shout out, they're at the back, and they are always looking at changing priorities, changing strategic plans, and sending them out to our faculty. So I do keep a close eye on, what is changing, how do I align my work with the changing priorities while also keeping the core focus of what I do. So I'm not really just everyone has a different research agenda, but my core questions are really important to me, and I can adapt them hopefully to the changing priorities. So I try and be responsive to change and seeing how my work can fit in with that. I think just being responsive and keeping an eye on what's changing, connect with people like the proposal development teams who know what's changing if you don't know what's changing. And being responsive to change, but also reminding yourself why you do your research too, right? Like if you're constantly just chasing trends, you might get a little bored as well. So making sure it's what you really care about. But I think with a lot of these priorities, it's like, gosh, I can easily adapt my work to fall within that. And that doesn't feel like I'm moving away from the questions that I deeply care about.
Yeah, so before, thinking about change, don't give up on the agencies that, are within your wheelhouse. One, because it's important for them. We don't want NSF suddenly to, not get any submissions. There's an excuse to cut it completely, right? So I still submit to NSF. I was just looking, I've got, 2 proposals pending there right now. So I've been here for 25 years, and I just looked, right? It's kind of depressing because they have archived every proposal I've ever submitted, and I'm over 59 proposals. So, it's like over 2 a year, and maybe, I've gotten 5 or 6, right? And that's just, funding's always been hard, right? So it's been a challenge, but keep going with those ones because the ideas from those can go into the other areas. To really adapt to the change, I'm leveraging, we've got 3 new faculty in our department, just great. They're energetic, right? They're nowhere, near as bitter or worn down as some other people in my department. and I'm looking to know it. One, I'm on this committee, I helped hire him, and I want to do more research with him. And young faculty also get to check that box that says new investigator, right? And so that's important, even if they're a co-I. So collaboration. And so just this last year, I was on 2 teams from my department with large submissions to DARPA, which was a whole new submission type. It was a 7-minute video And as you all know, how hard it is just to prepare for, just a Zoom meeting or something. We probably put in 60 hours for a 7-minute video to go out. We had the college videographer helping out and whatnot. And one of those two got the go ahead to go on what's called the marketplace, which now federal agencies, managers can look at that and say, do they want to add that to their portfolio? So I never, would have thought I'd be submitting to DARPA, but, we have some ideas. I bring my ideas in from my agricultural work, which again, I thought I was pure biomedical till I came here. So I think being adaptable, right, taking advantage of what USU is. We're not a strong biomedical, but we have a strong agricultural focus, and so play in all the fields that you can possibly play in.
Yeah, my team in big programs, it's a challenge. It doesn't, yeah. But it's now, even 10 years ago, it's always like you're talking about 10% or 12%, 15% funding rate, and now it's dropping. So I think looking for multiple opportunities for the same application is you could, of course, you need to adjust budget often. That's where I talk about NIH and potentially foundations. So there's that focus on specific diseases, like let's say cystic fibrosis foundation. We definitely submit grants to NIH and also to foundation. You can submit pretty much similar, or not identical, because you need to modify budget and slightly aims, but you could basically try multiple funding options for the same proposal. So another thing, we building bigger community around similar research interests. So we submitted large application 2 years ago on PO1. Unfortunately, it was not funded, but I don't view it as a wasted time and effort because we formed really strong collaborators to the working on the proposal with 4 different other institutions. And now we have 3 other new grants submitted, which I'm breaking down the PO1 application into 3 R1 and 1 R21. So we hope we'll have a more positive outcome. So kind of be creative, think about what you can do in this challenging environment. And again, I appreciate all the support that we're getting from Bonnie and Cody and from the college and the 17 applications and trying to be sustainable with it.
Yeah, I would just echo this diversity of funding portfolio idea. So not just looking for multiple opportunities to submit, but being deliberate about submitting to multiple agencies, because if one funding program goes away, and that's where you were really relying on funding, and you don't have something else, then you have a bit of a problem. And I've made some probably questionable life decisions. My research program includes 4 full-time software engineers, and they're not cheap. They're hard to keep going. They want to get paid. And that means that also I have to be really opportunistic about funding, because I might want to be really disciplined and say, well, I don't really want to do that. But sometimes I say, I'm going to do that because it's going to give me funding to keep these guys paid so that I can do the things that I really want to do. So again, it comes back to what kind of a research program do you really want to support, and how are you going to sustain that? And that diversity of funding is really important to keep going.
Okay, we're on to our last question for the panel, and I'm gonna take this one a little shorter than it is and focus on, if you're looking at one of those new opportunities, like you're switching from your traditional area where you've gone or the one you're comfortable with to a new area, what are the missteps to avoid? I think we've tried to hit on that, but you've probably thought about missteps we've all made in the past. So Jeff, or you can pass the mic down if you don't want to start.
I'll just say, the best idea submitted to the wrong program is dead on arrival, right? So do your homework. There's great opportunities out there. There are people who have submitted to those programs, who've been successful in those programs. Find those people, talk to them, get advice, make sure you're meeting all of the requirements. And there's no shortage of opportunities. Like, I think things have thinned a bit, right? The same opportunities that we had in the past are not there in some cases now. But for me, like, opportunities have opened up that I haven't necessarily, pursued as much in the past. And so I've just had to be a little more opportunistic, but that's also come with relationship building. The work that we're doing for the state of Utah right now is really because people like Beth Nielsen, who's the Water Lab director, is developing great relationships with the state, and she's dragging the rest of us behind her. And we're doing a lot of work to build trust and to build those relationships. And they don't have really strong active grant programs, but if you get to know them, they say, hey, we actually really need something. Can you help us do this? And so if you can build those relationships, you build reputation, new opportunities open up.
Well, I think also looking reviewer panels, if those available, if it's through NIH, let's say you want to switch institute and focus on something that's more fundable these days. So identify or get yourself familiar with who will be reviewing your proposals and see which panel is more likely to fund research you're doing, understand that, establish network of people who submitted to these panels and to learn from them. And that's really helpful when I attend conferences and annual conferences. You can find so much from that networking and understand better where your proposal fits the best and how get it more successful.
Yeah, I think I'll reiterate, serving on panels is a great way to identify missteps and see what is being triaged, right, when you're on these panels. And I serve on the USDA NEFA panel for my area. And again, this is discouraging. Last year, I think we had 80 submissions, and this year there's 219, and the budget didn't increase, right? And so we're going to be extra critical. I'm going to be looking for every excuse to see if there's something wrong. And I think with regard to Lisa's prompt of getting into new areas, I was on a panel for a large center, and I guess I got asked to be an expert reviewer on the idea of root mimetic systems, right? Because I come at it from an engineer, I know just enough plant physiology to be dangerous, right? And so I have a root mimetic system based on hollow fiber, and the proposal had something that was building on a root mimetic, and it was just so fundamentally flawed. But you had to be in the area to know, and so I was probably the one person reviewing this whole site that. You have to have the intellectual merit, and that was one of the big areas. And so I think they put it on there without really knowing what it meant, and so it might have hurt them. So I think it helps to have experts look it over and identify if you're getting into a new area, if you misspoken or done something wrong.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to these guys' comments. I think it's, trying to take something from one agency and just throw it to the other agency is going to be a big mistake. Having external people, having people collaborate with people on the ground who've had funding from that agency is going to help. Making sure that you're well aligned with that.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and also to working with faculty who typically submit to various different federal agencies. It's interesting to see the differences between an NSF grant, an NIH grant, a USDA grant. And so I get used to seeing the kind of language that are in each of those types of grants. And then I can also see if there's a narrative that's like, wow, this looks like an NIH grant, but you're submitting to an NSF. So I might say something to the faculty and just say, you need to make sure and look through, what the criteria are and how it's scored, and make sure you're addressing each of those scoring criteria. The other thing too is make some time to share your draft narrative with a colleague and a peer to get feedback, especially if they have had success in a particular with a particular funding agency. And I think that is so helpful. And had one other thing, and I think too, just as you were saying, you can't just copy and paste from one federal agency proposal to another because it will really stand out.
Okay, we're through our questions. I want to make sure I ask the panel any last thoughts anyone wants to share. Yeah,
I've overheard this coming in, and I think I've seen this. There's new like user group emails coming out, right? And I heard someone saying that we need to know what equipment is available at USU to be more competitive, right? And I think this is the place to start. Everyone that's in here, today, showing some interest. I'm just curious how many are starting faculty, right, that are eligible for these things. Just Maybe not as many as I would have thought, yeah. But yeah, I think identifying what resources we have will be really important for us to put competitive proposals together.
I'll add one other thought that we see. Remember, a lot of the agencies are 40 to 50% smaller than they were a year ago. That's going to change how they work. And so I think I'll back up. I was on a panel maybe a month ago for one of the federal agencies, and I did it because I wanted to see what the inner workings looked like. And so I think if you do get that opportunity, take it because it's valuable. But what I saw there too was they're triaging more, you know. They also, I experienced with a program manager a level of scatteredness that I have not experienced in 25 years of serving on stuff. And so they're under a lot of pressure. And so what am I trying to say to you? The best way we can present ourselves to the agencies is a very professional manner, respecting their time, reaching out for those conversations, being extremely well prepared so that we come in there and we maximize what we can get from what their very limited time is with us. So yes, go ahead.
I've been thinking about two proposals that have gone out of our office in the last couple of months that have been quite unique. And they're people that were already funded by certain federal agencies, but because the state had changed the DEI language before the federal government did, they had removed that language from their proposals, and they were funded because there were a lack of other proposals that met those requirements, and they canceled grants to other schools. And so now there's pots of money in those agencies that aren't being used because they've canceled these DEI grants. And these PIs have gone to those program officers and said, you have extra money. Or those program officers have come to those PIs and said, you're doing this right. We'd like to give you extra money. And so they're expanding their programs and bringing in more money for these smaller things that they were doing. And I think it's kind of a headache for both of them. But it's interesting to me. It's just asking. It's saying, we see that this has changed. We're trying to meet the agency or the executive orders. We're doing the work already. Can we help you by spreading this work, making it bigger, taking it more statewide? I don't know if that's clear, but it's just this innovative, taking an innovative approach to things, not being afraid to talk to the people that you're already working with and seeing how you can fill their gaps.
One of the things is you're re-emphasizing what I was saying. You cannot put your head in the sand right now. You cannot. If you put your head in the sand, the landscape's going to change on you. And so it's a matter of what is your routine to keep up to date with your agencies and understanding what they're doing. That you take that extra step to read the RFP that maybe a colleague doesn't read carefully because they've gone there all the time. It's the little things at the margins, folks, that can help you win a grant right now. That extra preparation. This is a lot like sports, right? You don't win national championships by not making your free throws or not rebounding. We've got to be doing it all right now to be competitive. And I think we heard from our folks today a really great group of suggestions about how to do that, to put yourself in the best spot to be successful. And so with that, I want to personally thank all of our panel members, outstanding faculty here at USU who've been leading the way in research. Elizabeth, for your outstanding role in proposal development, assisting all researchers in art sci and formerly science. And so let's give them a round of applause for their. Thank you. So someone referred to, and I think it was Elizabeth, that for a long time, starting in February 25 until about February of this year, we were running a bi-weekly update meeting because the landscape was changing so fast. And during that time, I would have discussions with various PIs who would bring me insights that I wasn't hearing. And today, I'm happy to say one of the PIs I found who was really someone who was was connected to her network and could help me see how things were really happening, particularly in one agency. We've invited her to do a Q&A today, so we're going to have what we call a spotlight discussion. And I would like to invite Donnie Elzinga in proposal development and Professor Alexis Ault to come forward.
I am Donnie Elzinga on the research development team and Office of Research, and I'm here with Alexis Ault. So excited you're here. We are just over the next 20-ish minutes going to just make her dive a little deeper. Ask her some questions. I'm going to cover some questions about recent conversations she's had, some pivots she's made, and just some insights she has to share with us. So Alexis, I'll just have you introduce yourself, your research program, your journey, anything you want to share.
Hi everyone. Whoa. Hi everyone. I'm Alexis Ault. I am a professor in the Department of Water, Earth, and Environmental Sciences. Yeah, that's our new department name. Yes, formerly Watershed Sciences and Geosciences. I study earthquakes, in particular how rocks and material properties in faults which host earthquakes govern or control how earthquakes propagate through the subsurface and what happens in between earthquakes. My research program here makes use of a number of state-of-the-art facilities that we have at Utah State, including our field emission SEM in the core facility, and also a new rock deformation and earthquake mechanics lab. The PI of that is my close colleague, Srisharan Sridharan. And importantly, my research program is influenced by collaborations and team-based science. Folks earlier talked about that, including researchers at Brown, University of Arizona, and most recently Lamont. Right now I have 4 PhD students, a co-advised master's student, a co-mentored postdoc, and soon to be 2 additional postdocs joining our group this summer. So it's an exciting time. I just wanted to say that I got off a plane a little while ago, changed in my car, and came here. And I was visiting University of California, Santa Cruz. And an interesting thing happened while I was there. The person who invited me, who's a close colleague, introduced me before I gave my talk. And she said, "Oh, Alexis does some really interesting work focused on geochronology and thermochronology of fault zones, and she's going to talk about that today." And that was not what I was going to talk about. And I got up there and I talked about some of our really exciting work that we've been doing that is along earthquakes that happened back in 2023 in Turkey. It's work that isn't even published yet. But that's what's exciting to me, and the data sets that are coming out of that. These data sets matter for understanding about earthquake mechanics and for people's everyday lives, including people here in the state of Utah, right? We live in earthquake country. And it hit me a couple things in that moment as I got up there to talk. One, how my research career has evolved here at Utah State. What I was trained in is not what I work on today. I was trained on earth processes that happened over hundreds of millions of years. Now I work on farts in geologic time. And that metamorphosis has fundamentally been shaped by being a faculty member here at Utah State, at a land grant school, at an R1 institution, and trying to demonstrate the impact that my work can have and the skills that I've cultivated over the years. The skills, turning them on new problems to try to have impact for society, for taxpayers, actually. So yeah, that's who I am.
Thank you. One of my favorite things working with all you faculty is the passion you have for changing the world. We love working with you. Okay, thank you, Alexis. So here's my first question I'm going to pepper you with. You've been working really hard to keep abreast of the current happenings at some of the federal agencies. And you've been talking to some program officers, sometimes for long conversations. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned from these discussions, the implications and recommendations that you have for us researchers here?
Sure.
That's a great question, and I want to start off by sharing that my research is funded by the National Science Foundation primarily, also by the U.S. Geological Survey, so Department of Interior, and the statewide California Earthquake Center. Just recently, I was part of a team that submitted a big proposal, or a pre-proposal, hopefully to be selected for a big proposal to the DOE. We can talk about that transition later, but that is my funding portfolio. And so when I'm engaging with program directors, you know, what Donnie's talking about is speaking with people at the National Science Foundation. And just like people said on the panel earlier, my relationship with program directors began from the very first time I wrote an NSF proposal. I was a postdoc, an NSF postdoc, that was a proposal, but my first proposal as a faculty member, let's say, I was a postdoc at the University of Arizona, and I asked to have a meeting with a program director at one of our meetings, Geological Society of America. And at that meeting, he told me the agency is really interested in fault processes. And I was like, I'm developing techniques to date faults. And my gears started turning, and I knew the path was becoming clear. So I just wanted to emphasize what others have said earlier about the relationships that you can cultivate, the respectful relationships that you can cultivate with program directors, the little insights, the pearls that you might get during those conversations. I have done that with every proposal I have written, is have those kinds of dialogues. And in fact, we have a multi-million-dollar frontier research and earth sciences project that's collaborative between earthquake scientists and earthquake engineers. And I mean, there was a lot of like advocacy for the success of that proposal that was happening with program directors. That had a big impact, I think. But recently, as all of you know, there's all these changes in the federal funding landscape, and this is, as a PI, this is tricky to navigate and so important to be strategic. And so I reached out to a program director and asked for a meeting. It's happened a couple weeks ago now. And this is the program director who oversees our FREST project. And the premise of it was about a specific aspect of the project. We work in Turkey and we cannot go there this summer because it is a level 4 do not travel per the State Department because of events that are happening in Iran. That's gutting for us that we can't go. So I wanted to talk to her about that and also offer like the strategies that we are implementing to re-scope our project to accommodate that. But of course, since I had her on Zoom, I started asking questions about what's going on in the agency. And she and I ultimately spoke for about an hour and a half. What she told me, I think, is really important for you all to hear. And this applies not just to the National Science Foundation, but Lisa mentioned that there's different layers of scrutiny that proposals are receiving. And it's important to be mindful of that when you're submitting proposals. So specifically in this case, what the program director shared with me is that right now, the Office of Management and Budget, although they officially approved the spending plan for fiscal year 26, things are not moving. And it is being stalled. Now, I also saw a reporter for Nature say that Congress is sitting on something, and I'm not sure whether that's true or what the details are there, but money is not moving. And what the program director shared with me is that certain components of different directorates have a little bit additional money right now. So we do know of some awards that are being made, but things are stalled. And this summer, there will be pockets of money that are available that are centered on the president's priorities. Now, I'm in the Geosciences Directorate. What does that look like? That looks like quantum, AI, hazards, critical minerals, energy, and water. Okay. So how is this going down? I think I'm just sharing what I frantically was taking notes on. And what the program director said was, you know, they will receive emails. Do you have any highly competitive proposals that fit in AI or speak to hazards? Give us those proposal IDs. We'll fund them. And so this is kind of a new way, a new process. What does that mean for all of us? What does that mean for all of us? I think it's important. And I guess what I would say is it means that there's more than one audience when you're writing your proposals. There are still going to be ad hoc reviews. I know there was that guidance that came out, right, that said they do a minimum of 2. There's still going to be ad hoc reviews. There are still going to be panelists. You have to reach those people in your proposals. You cannot abandon that and try to make it, and just speak to, say, the administration's priorities. And if you can make meaningful connections, meaningful and strategic connections to those priorities, it cannot hurt to point them out. So that is that additional level of sort of scrutiny on proposals that is going on. One thing that I don't totally know is I think they're looking at proposals that are already in the pipeline right now. Okay, so if you've submitted to NSF recently and you're waiting, there are panels that are going to be happening in April. Okay, that's the usual time that this happens. April, May, those will go forward, and then depending on the outcomes of that, then it's like, okay, how can program directors take particular highly competitive proposals and map them to these funding areas? And does that make sense what I'm saying? But this is an unusual thing, and it reminds me of someone may have had a comment about, is this USDA? What agency? A different agency?
They were one is state, but it's flow through, and
Okay.
the other is HHS.
But still, that's like I mean, it's a bit unusual. I don't know. Maybe there's more of this going on than I had realized, right? But it is a bit unusual to have like, oh, there's this extra money, and so we're going to give it to this team rather than it go through the normal process. So what I'm describing to you for the National Science Foundation is elements of the typical process, but bearing in mind this extra layer. I think it's really important to think about that. Yeah.
So what are you saying?
Yeah.
So just to drill down deeper, so are you saying in your proposal, you're trying to like breadcrumb them to national priorities? No, what's your thoughts on that?
I think that both in the project summary and perhaps, again, speaking to the National Science Foundation, in elements of the intellectual merit, you could have a subsection that makes that connection. I've had other conversations with the VPR of Brown, who's a co-PI in one of my grants, and this particular program director, where she was like, look, there's still going to be ad hoc reviewers and panelists who will get pretty annoyed if you make your proposal seem like it's something it's not, just to map to these priorities. Like strong science, strong and compelling science, that's not changing. But then what this program director said to me on Zoom the other day was, and it cannot hurt to make it easy on us to see those connections, to think of meaningful connections that you could mention. I would also just say that, I can't speak for all program directors, but what program directors are apparently doing is developing memos that help them map like directorates to these different priorities. What's an example of this? Okay, so one of the priorities is quantum. And I said to the program director, I said, what is quantum in the Geosciences directorate? Are you talking about nanotechnology? Like what quantum computing if we're using it? And she goes, I think of this as cutting edge technology. And I said, oh, okay. She said, no one in the agency really knows what quantum means. So we are really trying to think outside the box about how to do this. And I appreciate that insight, right? So they're trying to think from the inside about how they can support PIs and make those connections. They really are.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for those very wise. And our team in the Office of Research and Research Development, we're really working hard to stay up on this. So if you need support in like what are the breadcrumbs you should be leaving, right? If you need help, we are really trying to stay up on that. So please reach out. I don't see a lot of my colleagues here and they're shaking their heads, so they agree with me. Okay, so I think we have time for one more class. You have been very strategic in building a sustainable research program, like really focusing on the concept of working on what's next while you're working on your current project, which the panel kind of touched on. But can you tell us a little bit about how you've done that, like your thought process, steps you've taken, any thoughts you have on that?
Okay. I have a few thoughts about this, but one thing that I want to say is that some of the efforts that I have ultimately launched have come out of really serendipitous interactions and seeing opportunities. One is we had a faculty search. Tammy, I think you were on this committee with me when we hired Sharon, and Brady Cox was on that committee. I never met him before, and I was learning more about Brady Cox as an earthquake engineer in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and through that, committee work, through that service, I learned about his research program. And, I'm thinking about shallow fault zone processes. He's thinking about, shallow material behavior using these engineering tools. He's a world's expert in earthquake engineering and using certain geophysical tools to image the subsurface. And I emailed him and I said, hey, like, could we get together? I just want to bounce around ideas. Like, there could be some synergies. And that led to a SPARK proposal. That was one of the important seeds for that frontier research and earth sciences project on the earthquake critical zone that was funded. And that was one of those serendipitous moments. Just the minute he started talking, I was like, oh my gosh. And I had been thinking about what are ways that I can connect more with, different disciplines, like really different disciplines, not just, people who work on sedimentary processes versus structural geology, like what are bigger chunks? And this was one of those ways that happened. I think one of the things that I come back to is actually some advice that my PhD advisor gave me a long time ago that I try to remember. So I was in her office at the very end of my PhD in tears because I felt like I didn't know what the value, you're in that nihilism phase of your PhD and you don't know what the value is of your research. And I think I said to her, like, there's 6 people who care about the surface history of the slave craton, and you and I are 2 of them. Like, and she said to me, gosh, remember, look at all the skills you've developed. Whether it's, how to think like a scientist, yes, but data processing or, what amounts to big data, new modeling tools, or, thinking about problems in slightly different ways. Those are invaluable. So building on that concept, I try to remember the skill sets that I have and how they might apply to problems that are not necessarily the thing that I was trained in, but they might be the thing that I see as exciting to me, but it's also, exciting to federal agencies and to the moment. So yeah.
Thank you. I love the idea of your moments of serendipity in meeting collaborators and building network, but you also capitalized on it. Right. You took that next step. You saw the moment.
Yeah, I do want to say more thing. Yeah, one other thing I think that recently, and this is something especially since becoming, I get, I guess, a full professor, I'm thinking about this more, but certainly like post tenure is on my mind. Was how often do we feel like, oh, that'll never happen. That'll never happen here. We can't do that. It's not. I am tired of that mindset. I don't want that for me, and I don't want that for any of you here at Utah State. We are an R1 land grant school, and we have amazing resources and amazing human resources and scientists and people who do work across all kinds of spectrums. I mean, I'm a scientist, but it's not just that. Social sciences and the humanities. We have the human capital and we have the infrastructure. And we have been siloed for so long. And some of it is just seeing opportunities and being willing to bring people together. And so one last story that I'll share is, you know, Donnie, you forwarded to department heads the DOE EFRC, so Energy Frontier Research Center. And you forwarded that to my department head. And Dennis said, oh man, this is USU's chance. We have to go after this. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to hear that that'll never happen. And we pulled together a team. Berreau is on it. A team of awesome scientists. Oh my gosh, hi. Yes. Oh my gosh, hi. We have a team of 17 PIs. It was just the pre-proposal. But it was bringing all of our individual skill sets, and we work on these problems and turning them in a new way to say, no one in the DOE is thinking about deformed rocks and fault rocks. But we have a world-class earthquake science program here at Utah State. Let's go. So we did it. Now, will we be selected for a full proposal? I don't know, but it gave me confidence that, like, yes, we can. Yes, we can. And so I'm excited about that. I've never been funded by the DOE. We have people within the team that have. That's important strategy. Someone mentioned that earlier. But I can see ways that the team that has come together can push into other opportunities. Like, let's go. Yeah.
I'm not admitting anything. That was wasn't on that positive note. So thank you, Alexis, for your time, and then Lisa.
I'm actually not gonna use the CP.
Okay.
So, one thing we haven't touched on is right now, a lot of opportunities appear with short turnaround.
Yes.
Very short turnaround. It's ridiculous. So I want to say a couple things, and then I'm going to make Alexis tell a story. So, which is, she doesn't know what's coming yet. So, first of all, if you get one of those, contact your program or your proposal development specialist and SPO the day you decide you want to do it. Because we need to know it's coming. We know you could be late. This is where our 4-day rule is there because of our population of submission people. We've got to keep their workloads manageable. But we also know that we're seeing a lot of quick turnaround. And so communication is key, everyone, to make this work. Okay, now, one day, Alexis, your phone rang, I think it was. And I think it was a guy by the name of Brad Mortensen who called you. And he happened to be talking to a legislator, Speaker of the House. And Speaker of the House finds money when he wants to do things. Your story from here, Alexis. This was a short turnaround.
Yes. Yeah, this was unreal. I missed his call. I was on a Zoom helping a PhD student at Brown, and I happened to move my Zoom window and I saw my iMessage. Hi, Alexis. This is Brad Mortensen. I got your number. I tried to call. And he said, I was talking with the Speaker of the House, Mike Scholes, and he wants to know if we can study earthquakes and geothermal energy. And I want to know how much that's going to cost. He wants to know. I need a number. And okay. And I was like, I said to the young woman on Zoom, I said, Macy, I have to go. And I said, we'll take this up later. So anyway, yeah, so the first thing I did was I started, I called the department head up, Dennis Newell, who has expertise in geothermal energy research funded by the DOE. And I turned on a separate Zoom, because Zoom AI Companion listens and it takes notes. And I said, we need to just start talking about this, earthquakes and geothermal. And then we were talking about enhanced geothermal and what sort of resources you'd need. Then I ran downstairs and burst into Sharon's office, and I was like, we need to talk about this. And I called Brady Cox on the phone. And meanwhile, the president called me back and explained, long story short, that he would like me to come up with a number and think big. And I had about 2 hours to do it. And so we just started working and figured out that we need a science aspect, an infrastructure aspect, and a human capital aspect. And we probably want to do scientific drilling, to understand what the properties are of the materials at depth. Maybe this might be in the vicinity of the Wasatch Fault. We didn't have all the details at that point. And that there was certain infrastructure that we also needed to help instrument the drill hole, the borehole, and experiments that we want to do in the lab and some infrastructure. And we need people. And what a way to support students, postdocs, technicians. We need the resources. So we scrambled and put together, this was a little bit ambitious, a $12 million proposal. But we were, in our mind, we were like, well, maybe if we come back and we're at 5, like, we can't say 5, then we'll end up with 3 or 2. So we said 12, and of course, it was not going to be 12. But fast forward, I wrote this one pager with the help of these people, and we sent it to Brad, and and he said thank you. And then fast forward, I was in my group meeting, and he called again. This was Wednesday, and my grad student Leslie was presenting, and I said, I just have to go. And I left the room, and he said, I'm in the speaker's office, and could you please explain your proposal and why this needs to be done at Utah State? And it's like, I've been training for that my entire life. I am ready. And I made the case that, our state legislature has already invested in energy through the recent initiative in the College of Engineering. They are the source of funding for the Earthquake Engineering Research Center that Brady Cox is the director of. And I said, these resources will supercharge our effort to bring together understanding of seismicity, and specifically, actually, it turned out along the Wasatch Fault, and our ability to develop geothermal energy resources responsibly. And I said, we have built a world-class earthquake science group here. We have built a world-class earthquake engineering group here. And so we are the team to do it. We have the resources. With a little bit more, we can make this happen. And they were willing to give us $3 million. I couldn't believe it. And we had that $3 million for about 4.5 hours. Until the president texted that night and said, I'm so sorry, but it turns out that the speaker did not go through the Nucleus Institute to get that money. It was tied to, it doesn't matter, but didn't follow certain channels. And so, but they found some additional money, and you have $250,000. And he said, I'm so sorry. And I said, well, that's $250K more than I had at the start of it. And this is a pilot program. But I just want to emphasize there are elements of the same people and ideas, just in terms of being flexible and being strategic. The work that we do on earthquakes, I've been working on the Wasatch Fault since I first started here. But these are we're seeing different ways to use our skill sets to tackle different problems and use the resources that we have with a little bit of extra money to address problems that matter for the state of Utah. Now, one last thing, Lisa, what was going on behind the scenes? Why did Speaker House want this? So it turns out that there was a Senate bill to explore how we can convert coal-fired power plants into geothermal that face some opposition, because people said these are right along the Wasatch Fault. What about earthquakes? And that's a real concern. And so the speaker said, well, we're going to put some money towards like studying this. And this is how this came about. So, yeah, the lesson is you answer your phone, but it can't hurt to kind of have your elevator pitch, I think, ready. I had no idea that I was going to be asked to speak to people on speakerphone and make the pitch, but yeah.
So the point I wanted to make with that story is to be ready for the unexpected.
Yes.
To recognize where your research potentially matches, comes close to being close to priorities that are emerging regionally, nationally, locally. You never know who might contact you and say, we have some money and a problem to be solved. And we live in an era when we have to look at these kind of opportunities and see where they lead. And so that's what I wanted to emphasize. So thank you for saying, yeah.
I just co-sign that 100%. And I think sometimes, I think in the pre-tenure period, I didn't see myself as having that ability. But I want to encourage all of us that no matter the level that we're on, we have skills that we bring to the table and we can become part of these teams that do it. And we have to go after these sorts of things. I think we have to. Yeah, it's a different time.
Okay. Thank you, Alexis. Let's thank her again for good. Okay, well, I think I'm going to call it. This has been a great session. I want to thank again our panelists. I think many of them are still here, so thank you again. Thank Alexis for sharing some of her wisdom. Alexis has the best stories about some of her funding experiences, so that's why we brought her. And thank all of you for being here. We're here to support you. It's a challenging environment. We're all in this together. We've got to continue to navigate. You've heard some good tips here today about how things really work right now. And so continue to pay attention, continue to reach out and attend things and talk to us. We're always happy to give you any kind of help we can. So thank you again for being here and enjoy the rest of Research Week. Tomorrow we're recognizing patent awardees.
Yes.
Yay.